Hello. Today I want to talk to you about imaginary numbers. Now, people think imaginary numbers. They're not real, they're imaginary. Well, actually, in mathematics, there's a different meaning for the word imaginary numbers. Now, if you remember square roots or roots in general, anything that has an even root, generally you can't take the square root of it, or the fourth root, or the sixth root. To give an example, square root of 4, well, what times itself is 4? Well, it's 2. 2 times 2 is 4. Perfectly fine. Yeah, we can get that simple. If you have square root of negative 4, well, you got to think of a number that when multiplied by itself gives you a negative 4. Well, let's think about that. 2 obviously doesn't work because 2 will give us a positive 4. Negative 2. Well, negative 2 times, a little dot there, negative 2, it gives us a 4, but a negative times a negative gives us a positive. So we actually don't have any what's called real numbers, integers, if you will. Basically, if you think about numbers that you deal with in life normally, that can give you a negative if you square it. So mathematicians made up a phrase called imaginary numbers. Imaginary numbers. So the idea is that by definition, they define an imaginary number, which is a lowercase I, such as that, as being the square root of negative 1, by definition. So, square root of negative 4. Well, we can break that down as negative 1 times 4. So once we have negative 1 times 4, we can do the square root of each separately. So we can say it's the square root of negative 1 times square root of 4. Or, well, we know square root of 4 is 2. And we know square root of negative 1, by definition, we're calling it I. So this is 2I. Now again, this is more of a definition. However, it is used in a lot of, especially advanced engineering problems, and some advanced problems that deal with finances, where you do have answers that end in an I. Mostly it's used a lot of times in differential equations. If you're in algebra, you really may not see it that often. It is a good introduction because there are times when the answer will be a negative number. When you solve an equation, you have to take the square root of it. You end up with an I. Again, there are ways to equate that into a number. You can actually graph, put on a piece of paper. But for right now, I'm just trying to get used to the introduction for you, if you will, of an imaginary number. So let's go with one of our favorite numbers, take square roots of. You see this in all the books, 18, but negative 18. So with that negative 18 there, we have to break that down. Well, obviously, negative 1 to take care of that negative. Then we have to factor 18 using perfect squares. Well, perfect squares are 4. 4 doesn't go into 18. 9. 9 does go into 18. It's 9 times 2. So if we have negative 1 times 9 times 2, and we take the square root of each of them separately, so square root of negative 1 times square root of 9 times square root of 2, well, we know that's I, that's 3. Now, most of the time, you see, by convention, you see it as the number, the I if you have to have one, and then the square root symbol. The reason why you write this way is, well, this is just common in terms of writing a number in front. Even though it's not a variable, it is negative square root of 1. It is a number. It still is a letter. Even though it's not a variable, it's a letter, so we write it second. And we normally write the square root last. You notice how I put these little hats on square roots, or little tails, if you will, right here that come down. I do that so you know where it ends. A lot of times you will see in books that. Now, if you see a number that looks like this, the question is that 5, is that 5 times square root of 2, or is it square root of 25? It's hard to tell looking at that. it's really hard to tell looking at that. So what you need to do is if you put the little hat there, first of all, you write the 5 out front first. It takes care of it a lot easier. But if you don't do that, you can see how is everything set up that way. So again, imaginary numbers, at least for the introductory phases of it, not in terms of solving equations, but just the introductory phases of it. Just remember, if you have a negative underneath a square root, a fourth root. Now, you're thinking, well, you said fourth, you said square, which is 2. Fourth, which is 4. Eighth, which is 8. How about 3? Well, let's try out 3 here. Let's go cube root of 8. And so we have to find a number times a number times a number being 8. Well, we know 3 is too big because 3 times 3 is 9. So, and 1 won't work because 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. So in this case, 2. 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 is 8. So that's just 2. Well, how about the cube root of negative 8? Well, remember we said that you can't take a negative of a square root or an even power like a fourth or an eighth or a sixth or a tenth. For this case though, well, obviously the number is going to be 2 because our value hasn't changed. Our sign has changed, but not the number. So will negative 2 work here? Well, negative 2 times negative 2 is a positive 4. So that's a positive 4 times a negative 2. Well, 2 times 4 is 8. A positive times a negative will give you a negative. So in this case, if you have an odd power root, you can do negative. If you have an even power root, you can't do a negative. So if you even have, let's say, a fourth root of negative, and let's pick up a number here, negative 16. Try and pick a number that works out nice. Now we did cube root of 8, which is 2. 2 times 8 is 16, so the answer should be 2 here, but we have that negative. So if we have negative 2 times negative 2 is a positive, times a negative 2 is a negative, times negative 2 gives us a positive. So it can't be negative 2 here, and positive 2 obviously won't work because 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is 16, not negative 16. So in this case, the only thing that'll work is if we bring out our friend I. So it's 2 times I. So again, that's kind of the introduction, if you will, to negative numbers. Just deal with knowing that if you have a negative underneath the square root, just make sure that you have that I out there and treat the rest as a normal number. Thanks so much and talk to you later.